One thing we haven't talked about is one of the central metaphors. There's a lot of great metaphors in the book, but of course there's the
Yeah.
pool on the cover, and this idea of people, rather than sharing their pool with everyone, would fill in the pool. And you find that over and over again. These people, predominantly white people, who would rather poison everything than share. Why do you think that is, and how do we overcome that?
Yeah, so I should say, right, that the reason why there are swimmers on the cover of the book, and the reason why the pool is such a strong metaphor throughout The Sum of Us is that, to me, it's a quintessential example of a nice thing provided by government, the free public pool, of which there used to be nearly 2,000 across the country. And these aren't like rinky-dink community pools. These are big, beautiful resort style public swimming pools that could hold thousands of swimmers at a time. They were this sort of glittering manifestation of a deeper ethos at the time that really came out of the Great Depression. It was this New Deal spirit of public goods, this commitment to the idea that we would use public money to provide for the public good, right? It's a time where we went on a building boom in this country of roads and bridges and schools and libraries and pools. And, in the book, I talk about both the literal exclusion from public goods that happened on a racial basis, where most of the public goods of the first half of the 20th century were for whites only, either explicitly or just by custom, enforced through intimidation and violence, like the segregated public pools, not just in the South, but all over the country. And then I tell the story of what happened when Black families and their allies were able to finally sue and say to courts, it's our tax dollars that have been funding these public goods all along. And in the case of the swimming pools, we want our kids to be able to swim too. Many towns and cities across the country, when faced with public pool desegregation, destroyed their public pools rather than integrate them. And a really important discipline that I tried to have when I was researching and writing the book was to exercise my muscle of radical empathy. Right? You could say, oh my gosh, people were so crazy and racist and mean that they would do that. Aren't they silly? Aren't they ridiculous? But you know what? It happened all over the country. And I don't believe that everybody who did it was just out of their mind, right? There must have been some logic, some rationale, some story that made it seem like, you know what? It's a sacrifice to lose this public good, but it's right and proper that we should do that. Because the thing is, Rob, everything we believe comes from a story we've been told. So I wanted to ask, well, what story was being told to so many white Americans throughout the 20th century that made them believe there was something so wrong with people of color that they shouldn't share a swimming pool with them, they shouldn't let their kids go to school with them? And who was telling that story? Who was selling that story? And how are the people selling that story to the majority of white people profiting from the sale of that story economically and politically? That's when we really began to think about, well, if the powerful people in government and business has been telling us to disdain and distrust this group of people, and they do it relentlessly through laws and policies and practices, through advertising and media and rhetoric, through messages about church and religion and the whiteness of God, right? Then many people are going to believe that, right? We're not a skeptical people, and so for me, I'm much more interested in holding accountable the people who are selling racist stories for their own profit than the people who are desperate enough to buy them. And the thing that's so great about the fact that, racial identity is really about a story, a set of stories that we tell ourselves and that we believe, is that at any given point, anybody can decide to believe different stories and have those beliefs create different actions. And there are white people, as I said, throughout history and standing up today who have decided not to believe the racist stories and have decided to be in solidarity with other people. And I'll tell you, Rob, throughout the work that I did for the book, as well as for the podcast called The Sum of Us, which I also think that young people would really enjoy. It's available wherever podcasts are streamed. It's a 9-episode podcast series. In all of that, I would meet people who had decided to live their lives in solidarity with people with different backgrounds from them. And to a person, there was just sort of this light within them. Like, I have rejected the old stories about how we are so different from one another and about how we are not in the same human family. And in so doing, I have really discovered my own humanity and the fact that I am connected. I'm not isolated and lonely and apart. I am not in a war with my brothers and sisters on this planet, but I am part of a big human family that knows no racial categories, but really understands that there is only one race, and it's the human race. And I've taken action, right? I've stepped out and been courageous to defend other people or to stand up and fight for what all of my community needs. And that makes me feel powerful and clear and connected and not overwhelmed and alone. That choice is always available to any of us.